Hello, my name is Taya and I'm here to teach you a little bit about art history. Today we're going to learn a bit about Paul Cezanne. Paul Cezanne was a French post-Impressionist painter whose works and ideas paved the way for a change in 20th century art, assisting in the transition from the 19th century conception of the artistic endeavour. It is believed that Cezanne formed the bridge between late 19th century Impressionism and Cubism as it emerged in the early 20th century. His early works were largely influenced by Romanticism and Realism until he arrived at a new pictorial language that was due to his intense examination of Impressionism. He broke the established artistic rules by giving up the use of perspective and striving for a renewal of traditional design methods with the use of impressionistic colour space and principles. His repetitive brushstrokes are recognisable and form highly complex forms. They show the artist's intense story of his subjects. The works he created provoked incomprehension and ridicule. So let's get a bit more in depth into his life. Cezanne was the child of milliner and banker Louis Auguste Cezanne and Anne Elizabeth Honorine Orbit, and he was born out of wedlock. His parents only married after the birth of his younger sister Marie, who was born in 1841. In 1844, his youngest sister Rose was born in 1854. His father was the co-founder of a banking firm that was highly successful during Cezanne's life, giving the family financial stability that was not available to most of Cezanne's contemporaries. It is said that his mother was vivacious and romantic, but quick to take offence, and she was whom Cezanne got his conception and vision of life. When the artist was 10, he entered the St. Joseph's School with classmates such as Philippe Solari, Henri Gaquet, and Joachim Gasquet. When he moved to College Bourbon in 1852, where he stayed 6 years, he became friends with Émile Zola and Baptistin Bailly. They became known as the Three Inseparables. Many believe this was the most carefree time of the artist's life, as he swam with his friends and fished on the banks of the Arc. They debated art, read Homer and Virgil, and practiced writing. In 1857, he moved to the Free Municipal School of Drawing, where he studied under Joseph Gibbet, a Spanish monk. However, his father saw Cezanne as an heir to his bank, so he enrolled into law in 1859, where he attended lectures for the study of the jurisprudence. He studied law for 2 years despite his lack of passion for the subject, but he neglected his studies for drawing and writing. He took evening classes at the Art Museum, where his teacher was the academic painter Joseph Gibbet, and by August the same year he had won second prize for his figure studies. That same year, his father bought the famed House of Wind, a derelict Baroque estate that would later become Cezanne's home and studio. In 1860, he painted the walls of the drawing room, creating large-scale murals of the Four Seasons. Finally, Cezanne went against his father's wishes and left for Paris in 1861, a decision that was strongly encouraged by Zola, who had already been living in the city and encouraged Cezanne to join him there. The father and son eventually reconciled, and the artist later received an inheritance of 400,000 francs that rid him of any financial stress. Cezanne's start in Paris was lackluster. He applied for and was denied from an art school before he attended another, where he was devoted to life drawing. This was where he met Camille Pissarro and Achille Empereur. What started as a master and student relationship with Pissarro led to a collaborative working friendship. He continued the tradition of copying works by old masters such as Michelangelo, Rubens, and Titian in the Louvre. Despite this, the artist felt like he might return home. Zola wrote to their childhood friend, "Paul is still the excellent and strange fellow I knew at school. To prove that he hasn't lost any of his originality, I have only to tell you that as soon as he got here, he talked about returning." The friend asked Cezanne to paint his portrait, but after he finished, he destroyed the picture because he wasn't satisfied, and by 1861, he was home working at his father's bank. He moved back to Paris in 1862, where he went back to the art school and met Claude Monet, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and Alfred Sisley. Rather than follow the official artistic life in France, Cezanne was inspired by Courbet and Delacroix, artists that strove for the renewal of art and the depiction of unembellished reality, calling themselves realists. When Manet, Pissarro, and Monet were excluded from the official salon, Napoleon III had a Salon of the Rejected at the official next salon, and Cezanne's works were shown in the exhibition in 1863. His paintings were rejected from the official salon every year from 1864 to 1869. The artist's first year was thanks to his friend Antoine Guillemette becoming a member of the jury and passing off Cezanne as his student to secure his position. However, his work was exhibited on a poorly lit wall in a secluded room and got no attention. It was his final successful submission to the Salon. In the summer of 1865, Cezanne moved back home, and by August he had created a whole new series of paintings of still lifes and portraits using a palette knife. At the beginning of 1869, Cezanne had returned to Paris and met a bookbinder's assistant, Marie Hortense Ficquet, who was 11 years his junior. During the Franco-Prussian War, Cezanne and Hortense Ficquet moved to a fishing village where they would visit to paint frequently, as the place's Mediterranean atmosphere fascinated him. He managed to avoid conscription for the military, and he managed to hide from those who named him a deserter. The couple moved back to Paris in 1871, and their first son was born in early 1872. His mother was told about the family, but his father was not informed due to his anger. From 1872 to 1874, Cezanne, his wife, and child lived in Auvers, St. Louis, where he met the doctor and art lover Paul Cezanne. His name may be familiar because he was the doctor for Vincent van Gogh a while later. By 1872, Pissarro became the mentor to Cezanne, who had become shy and irritable, promoting him to turn away from the dark colours and gave him advice to paint using primary colours. Cezanne believed the Impressionistic technique was bringing him closer to his goal. In 1867, the young painters in Paris put together their own exhibition due to the lack of support for their works. The place of the exhibition was the studio of photographer Nadar, and despite fears about his bold paintings, Pissarro pushed Cezanne's participation in the exhibition. The exhibition was a financial failure, and each artist was in a deficit of over 180 francs, though Cezanne's The Hanged Man's House was one of the few pictures that sold. Unfortunately, by March 1878, Cezanne's father had found out about his illegitimate child and cut his monthly allowance in half, sending the artist and his family into a financially tense period until his father relented in September. They continued moving around until Louis Auguste had built him a home in the early 1880s where he would later paint with Manet and Renoir. The artist's long friendship with Zola had become increasingly distant, growing more so when Cezanne visited the writer's luxurious summer home between 1879 and 1882. Cezanne was jealous of his friend's lavish lifestyle, and it reminded him of his own inadequacy. In 1886, Zola released a book with a protagonist that Cezanne drew parallels with himself, and it was thought that their friendship was over. However, we now have discovered letters that dispute this. The letters show that their friendship had endured for a while after this event. In the presence of his parents, Cezanne and Hortense Ficquet were married in 1886. The marriage was not one of love, and it is said their relationship had deteriorated by this point and instead was for Cezanne to secure parental rights for his now 14-year-old son. From this point on, they stayed in Providence except for some travelling abroad. Despite their tense relationship, Hortense Ficquet was the person Cezanne depicted the most, completing a known 26 paintings of her between 1870 and 1890. In 1886, Cezanne's father died, leaving his estate to the artist, his mother, and sisters, and a sizable income which gave Cezanne financial freedom once again. Cezanne's first solo exhibition was held in 1895 at Ambrose Follard's gallery in Paris, and his fame began rising steadily. The following year, he had the opportunity to take part in the Centennial exhibition in Paris. In 1901, Cezanne acquired land north of the city where he built his studio. The year he moved in, 1902, was also the year that Zola died, leaving Cezanne devastated despite their long estrangement. His health had begun deteriorating. He had diabetes and depression, which manifested in a significant distrust of most people. The artist was becoming more recognized, but with that came hateful press and threatening letters. A critic wrote a highly critical article entitled "Love for the Ugly" that described scenes of spectators laughing at his paintings. People would leave copies of the article on his doorstep, requesting he leave the town he was dishonoring. Cezanne told his coachman, "I don't understand the world, and the world doesn't understand me, so I withdrew from the world." When he notarized his will in 1902, he declared his son to be the sole heir, and Hortense Ficquet is said to have burned all of his mother's mementos. The artist's increasing depression of old age was becoming evident, and he made notes about his life becoming deadly monotonous. For a month in 1904, an entire room at the Paris Autumn Salon was furnished with the works of Cezanne. He was shown again in London the next year, and again in that year's Paris Autumn Salon. On October 15, 1906, the artist was caught in a storm when he was working in the field. He decided to go home 2 hours later, but collapsed and lost consciousness on his way home. He was picked up by a passing driver, and due to hypothermia, he contracted severe pneumonia. He regained consciousness due to his housekeeper rubbing his arms and legs to restore circulation. The next day, he fainted when attempting to paint in the garden and write letters to his paint dealer. He was put to bed by his housekeeper, but never left it again. Telegrams were issued to his wife and son, but he died before they could make it home. Here are the artist's major artistic periods. Cezanne's dark period was inspired by French Romanticism and early realism, modelled by Eugène Delacroix and Gustave Courbet. His paintings at this point involved thick application of paint, high contrast, dark tones, shadows, pure black paint, with the occasional white, green or red to brighten up the composition. Primary themes of the period include portraits of family members and demonic erotic content that was reminiscent of his own personal trauma. Cezanne's Impressionist period occurred under Pissarro's influence. He began to abandon his dark colour palette and adopted a brighter canvas. When he began utilising the primary colours, he stopped his technique of thickly applying paint and learnt the loose technique of his role models. This is when Cezanne broke away from the Impressionist style and built forms by diagonally applying paint across the canvases and focused on the balance of composition in his works. He increasingly painted figure, landscape and still life paintings. The works created during his lyrical period are characterised by figures in landscapes. He created around 140 paintings and sketches just on the theme of bathing. You also begin seeing his admiration for classical painting. He was concerned with the composition and interaction between colours and shapes as well as nature and figures. He began using both photographs and sketches for his templates, as he did not like having live nude models. Here are some of Paul Cezanne's most famous works. The Murder, The Boy in the Red Vest, Melting Snow, Portrait of Madame Cezanne with Loosened Hair, The Basket of Apples, Pyramid of Skulls, Jug, Curtain and Fruit Bowl, The Card Players Series, The Bathers. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.